In today's video, I thought we'd do something a little bit different just to change things up. I'm going to discuss with you today my favorite players from all 31 NHL teams. We'll get into that coming up next. So welcome back to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we're discussing favorite players from all 31 teams across the NHL. We'll go through alphabetical order here, and I'll tell you who my current favorite player is on each team for the upcoming 2019-2020 NHL season. I just thought this would be something a little bit different I've never done before. Anytime I report on any news or anything like that from around the NHL, I try to be unbiased and pretty neutral, but I thought we'd change that up and do something a little different today and just talk about who my favorite players are. It gives you a chance to kind of learn a little bit more about me and what players I really like and appreciate watching around the NHL. And of course, I want to know who your favorite players are as well. Allow me to get to know you a little bit in return, so make sure you leave some comments and let me know which players on these teams are your favorites as well. First up, we've got the Anaheim Ducks, and my favorite player currently on that team is goaltender John Gibson. He's an absolute beast back there. He keeps them in every game. In my opinion, he's by far their best player and one of the top goaltenders in the NHL, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for how he plays. John Gibson is a terrific young goaltender, going to be with the Ducks for a long time, and definitely my current favorite player on that team. Next up, we have the Arizona Coyotes, and my current favorite player on the Coyotes roster right now has to be Clayton Keller. He's a young, dynamic offensive forward who's really fun to watch. Had an awesome rookie season. He did have some setbacks last year, but I know that he can certainly break through and come back and have a much better season for the coming year, and I do expect big things from him down the road. Another young American-born forward in the NHL who's certainly having a major impact on his franchise. He's a ton of fun to watch, and really I don't get to watch the Coyotes a whole lot because of the difference in time zones, but when I do, I certainly look forward to watching him play. Next up, we've got the Boston Bruins, and by far my favorite player on that team is center iceman Patrice Bergeron. Bergeron's been a player that I've admired for his entire NHL career. He's a solid two-way player, one of the hardest working guys around the NHL, and one of the most complete players as well. And not only that, but he's a really good person as well. He does a lot of great things off the ice, and you can't help but admire his leadership and everything he does for that city and for that team. And he's just such a great leader. So Patrice Bergeron is not only one of my favorite players on the Bruins, but he's one of my favorite players around the entire league. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and my current favorite player from the Sabres is Rasmus Dahlin. He's going to be a generational type defenseman, an absolute stud back there. He's only entering his second season, but last season he certainly showed that he's a solid young defenseman. He certainly made a lot of great plays last year. He was fun to watch. He's a terrific skater, and I'm going to have a lot of fun watching him grow and develop into being one of the top young defensemen around the NHL. But for me, with the Buffalo Sabres, they do have some other great players as well, but Dahlin is by far the most fun to watch in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to see what he develops into over the next few years. Next up is the Calgary Flames, and my favorite player on the Flames currently is Sean Monahan. Sean Monahan, in my opinion, is a player who's greatly underrated, doesn't get as much appreciation as he should, but he's a huge part of that Flames franchise. He's a hard-working two-way player. He's a consistent 30-goal scorer. I just admire his hard work, his dedication, and how he plays on the ice. He's just a lot of fun to watch, and I can see him developing into being one of the better two-way centers around the NHL here as he continues to mature into being one of the league's top players. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, the bunch of jerks, and my favorite jerk to watch is definitely young forward Sebastian Aho. He's a dynamic young forward. He's really fun to watch. He's greatly offensive. I remember watching him even back playing for Finland in the World Juniors a number of years ago. I've been watching this guy play since he's been 17, 18 years old. He's a lot of fun to watch. I just really enjoy watching his offensive talents on the ice. Carolina, up until the last year or so, hasn't been as entertaining of a team to watch, but they certainly made things more entertaining last year with the storm surge. Aho is certainly a big part of their future, locked in long term, and I just love watching the guy play. I really appreciate a lot of his offensive abilities. Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks, and my favorite player on the Hawks right now is Captain Serious Jonathan Toews. He's a solid two-way player, hard-working. He's pretty solid offensively as well, great in his shootouts. Another guy that I've been watching play since he was in the junior days. I remember watching Jonathan Toews play for Team Canada back in the World Juniors when they were in the playoff rounds, doing the shootouts where they kept going over and over and over. He's a really solid hockey player. Doesn't always get as much accolades as he deserves, in my opinion. He's a really solid two-way player. As you can see with guys like Bergeron and Toews, I really appreciate the strong, hard-working two-way forwards, and those two guys certainly represent that. So for me, Jonathan Toews is my favorite Blackhawk. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche, and by far my favorite player on the Avs right now is Nathan MacKinnon, for a variety of reasons, but he's certainly from my neck of the woods. He's from Atlantic Canada, where I'm from as well, so I certainly like to support my local players as well, but he's really developed into being one of the top players around the NHL. Watching him play in the playoffs last year was a real treat. He has a tremendous line mates with Rantanen and Landeskog, quite a trio there for the Avalanche, but MacKinnon really has all the tools. He was first overall selection back a number of years ago. Took a little bit longer than I thought to really develop into the player he is today, but he's reached that plateau. He's got a great bargain contract for the Avalanche. He's just overall fun to watch, and he's going to be one of the top players in the NHL for a long, long time. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and my favorite Blue Jacket is hardworking defenseman Seth Jones. He's another player that kind of goes under the radar a little bit, doesn't always get as much appreciation as he should. He's one of the league's top defensemen, slowly becoming more and more recognized every year. I think someday he will win a Norris Trophy. Another player that I've been watching for a long time as well, even before he entered the NHL. At one point, he was projected to be the first overall selection in his draft year. He did fall down. I believe he ended up going number 4 overall. But Jones is a player that's really developed into being such a solid, well-rounded defenseman and can play in all situations. And I really have a lot of appreciation for how he plays and what he does for Columbus. Next up, we have the Dallas Stars, and my favorite player on the Stars is Ben Bishop. I mean, he's a goaltender that I've had a lot of respect and admiration for. He was a little bit of a late bloomer, didn't really get a solid starting NHL job until he was a little bit older, bounced around a little bit, started with St. Louis. He was in Ottawa briefly. They traded him over to Tampa, and then obviously went from Tampa to a brief stop in LA over to Dallas. But I've kind of followed him around his entire career. He's a terrific goaltender. He's really tall, really lanky, but he gets the job done. He's been solid year after year. Hopefully one of these days he can get a little bit more recognition, maybe even get a chance to lift the Lord Stanley's Cup. That would be a nice honor to see for Ben Bishop, but I do think for me, he's my favorite player on the Stars. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings, and my favorite player on that team is Dylan Larkin. The guy's an absolute speedster around the ice. He's a tremendously gifted offensive player. I do believe he will become their captain. He's a hard-working player with a lot of skill, a lot of speed. I certainly appreciate how he plays the game as well. He seems to be a stand-up player, and I think he's going to be a great leader for the Red Wings for a long, long time. Next up, we have the Edmonton Oilers, and how can it not be Connor McDavid? McDavid is one of the best players in the world and one of the most fun to watch around the NHL. The things that he can do at high speed is absolutely crazy. Anybody who can appreciate how this guy plays is just really not a great hockey fan, in my opinion. Connor McDavid is a treat to watch night in, night out, and one of the few bright spots on the Oilers. So when I'm going to watch an Edmonton Oilers game, I want to see Connor McDavid. That's the only reason I turn it on. Otherwise, there's really not a whole lot there to see and not a whole lot of entertainment. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers, and you're going to see my pattern of really liking hardworking two-way forwards continue. My favorite player on the Panthers is Alexander Barkov. Barkov's another guy, in my opinion, who's underrated. Is solid two-way player, great on face-off, great defensively, can play in all situations. He's incredibly offensively talented. He's really one of the league's top players, one of the league's top center icemen. Kind of like I said, kind of flies under the radar because of where he plays a little bit, I think, but he's soon going to be getting more recognition. That Panthers team's gone through quite a transformation this offseason, and I do think he will be a big part of their future, and someday he's going to get a lot more recognition as one of the league's top players. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings. Now, the Kings are another team because of where they're at in the West Coast. I don't get to watch the Western Conference teams quite as much, but I've always been a fan of Drew Doughty. Now, I know last year, Doughty's season wasn't the best, but overall, I just really appreciate how he plays. He's a really solid defenseman back there. I know his contract that just kicked in based on how he played last year might not be the best, and I know there's certainly a lot of people feel he's overpaid, and maybe he is a little bit. I guess only time will tell, but Doughty's another player that I've been watching since the junior days. He's a solid defenseman. He's fun to watch. A very entertaining hockey player, and when I get to watch the LA Kings, he's the guy I look forward to most seeing on the ice. Next up, we have the Minnesota Wild, and my favorite player on there almost got traded twice this past offseason, and that's speedy forward Jason Zucker. Zucker's a really fun player to watch, in my opinion. He's got a lot of speed, he can score, and just one of the few players that I really enjoy watching when I watch the Minnesota Wild. Another team in the Western Conference Central Division. I don't get to watch them quite as much as I'd like. Obviously, I mainly get to watch Eastern teams a lot more. Obviously, I'm in the Eastern time zone, so watching Eastern Conference games is certainly, a lot more convenient for me without staying up too late. But the Wild are a team, like I said, I don't get to watch a lot, but when I do, I really look forward to watching Jason Zucker play. He's really fun to watch. He's really fast. He can score, and I just really appreciate how he plays. Next up, we have the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm a big fan of the calm, cool, collected Carey Price, who's one of the best goaltenders in the world and has been for a long time, outside of a little bit of a blip on the radar for a little while there, where he did struggle with Montreal. He seems to be back into form, and I do believe someday he will help them regain another championship. Carey Price is just so calm back there. He's a calming presence, so that brings a lot of leadership. He's one of the top goalies. And another guy that I've been watching since his junior days. Just had a terrific career, and it's really been acknowledged quite a bit as being one of the top goalies. And really, if you look at Montreal, I think the Habs go as Price goes. When he struggled, they struggled. It goes hand in hand. In my opinion, he's by far their best player, most valuable, and he's also my favorite on the team. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators. Now, based on all the players I've named so far, this one might be a little bit different, but my favorite Predator is actually defenseman Ryan Ellis. Ryan Ellis is another guy I've watched a lot since his days in junior, and I've really admired how he's developed into being a solid top four defenseman in the NHL. Ryan Ellis is certainly an undersized defenseman, but he's certainly more of a prototypical defenseman in today's NHL. He certainly is a good skater, gets around the ice well, has some offensive abilities, has learned to defend well with what he has for size and attributes, and really overall has really appreciated his game. The Nashville Predators are a team, like I said, I don't get to watch a ton because of where they're located, so with the time difference, it doesn't always work out to watch a lot of their games, and certainly a lot of their forwards are just not guys that I find overly entertaining sometimes. So when I watch the Predators, I watch them more for their defenders and their goaltending, and really for me, Ryan Ellis is just the treat to watch on the Predators' blue line. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and my favorite Devil has to be Taylor Hall. I mean, Taylor Hall is a terrific hockey player. Now, that might soon become Jack Hughes. It's hard to say. Hughes hasn't officially played yet. I mean, I'm a big Hughes fan, but obviously I'm not going to pick any of the guys from the 2019 draft just because they haven't officially played yet, so I just didn't feel right naming any of those players my favorite players, but I am quite excited to watch Hughes this year and see how he makes out. But for right now, we're going to stay with Taylor Hall. He's by far their best player. As he goes, the team goes. Like last year, obviously, he got hurt and missed a lot of time, and they certainly fell down the standings. Obviously, worked out, though. They got a lottery pick and get to pick Jack Hughes, so it's not really all for nothing. But at the same time, the year before he was on an MVP level, they made the playoffs. So he's by far their best player. A lot of fun to watch. And a former first overall pick, and just a player that I have a lot of respect for. Next up, we have the New York Islanders, and by far my favorite player on the Islanders is Matt Barzal. Barzal's another young, dynamic offensive player with a ton of speed, a lot of skill. Certainly going to be the face of that franchise, I think, for a long time. I know that Anders Lee's the new captain after John Tavares left town, but really longer term, I think that's Barzal's team. That franchise is going to go as he goes. Hopefully they can get him locked up to a nice contract, as he's not far from completing his entry-level contract and be one of the next batch of RFAs here soon. But Barzal's a lot of fun to watch on the Islanders, really. If you take a look at their roster, there's a lot of veteran guys there who can contribute and allow them to be successful last year. But I think by far Barzal is the most fun to watch. Next up, we have the New York Rangers, and my favorite Ranger player right now is Mika Zibanejad. Zibanejad's a player, again, that I've been watching since his days in junior back in Sweden in the World Junior Tournament. Of course, he came into the NHL with the Ottawa Senators, who is my favorite NHL team, the team I follow the most and watch the most. So I was a big Zibanejad fan when he was on the Senators, and as a lot of these former Senators have made their way around the league, especially the ones I was a big fan of, especially guys like him, I certainly will continue to cheer them on as they play for other NHL rosters. And really, since he's been in New York, he's really evolved to becoming that much stronger of a player. He's now a first-line center. Pretty solid guy. Going to get the chance to play with Artemi Panarin this year, maybe even Kakko as well. And his numbers are going to continue to grow, and I just really admire the player he's become. Now, speaking of the Ottawa Senators, they are up next, and I had a hard time deciding here, being my favorite team and all, but I had kind of had to declare a tie between Brady Tkachuk and Thomas Chabot, the two young faces of the franchise for many years to come. Of course, they just locked up Thomas Chabot, and right now he's projected to be, Erik Karlsson-like on that blue line. If you take a look at his numbers in his first few years in the NHL compared to Erik Karlsson, in a lot of ways, his numbers are actually better, and he seems to be better defensively. Like, Karlsson was so struggling defensively in his first few years where, Chabot's not perfect, but he's not struggling to the point that Karlsson did. And with Brady Tkachuk, what can you not like? I mean, he plays so hard, goes to the net. He's a gritty player. He's had that Tkachuk attribute that just kind of drives everybody around him crazy, and you really appreciate the fact that he's on your team. But those two guys are going to be two major components for this franchise moving forward that can hopefully in a few years' time get them out of this rebuild and get them to be more competitive and respectable. But they're both incredibly fun to watch, and the future is bright in Ottawa because of them. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers, and my favorite player on that team is Sean Couturier. So yes, the fact that I really seem to appreciate two-way strong forwards with strong offensive abilities will continue here. Sean Couturier was born in my home province of New Brunswick, so obviously, like I said, I try to support the local players as well when there's a local connection. So I really like that fact, but I really like how he plays. He's a solid offensively gifted player who can really play in all situations, is strong defensively, great on faceoffs. I just really think he's become such a solid, complete player that I just have so much respect and admiration for how he plays. We've seen him play hurt through the playoffs. The guy's a beast. I just don't see how anybody could not really appreciate how much effort he puts into his game and what he brings to the Flyers organization on the ice. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this one should not be any shocker. It is Sidney Crosby, my favorite player on that roster. Obviously, like I said, he's from the Maritimes, so we get that local connection again, but he's also one of the best players and most decorated players in the world. Played for Team Canada, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, he's done a lot of great things, multiple Stanley Cups, numerous individual awards, gold medals. What is not to like and respect about this player? Every time I watch the Penguins, I look forward to seeing him on the ice. I've had a privilege of watching him play in person a few times. Just a well-respected player, and I just have a lot of admiration for what he's become, and it's certainly still fun to watch even today. With the St. Louis Blues, I had a tie, just like the Ottawa Senators, because of a local connection as well. Goaltender Jake Allen is from my home city here, Fredericton, New Brunswick, and he's a player that I have a lot of support for and want to see succeed. I know he's had his ups and downs the last couple of years, but he certainly brought Lord Stanley's Cup home this past summer. I had a chance to see the Stanley Cup live in person when he had a little celebration downtown. There is a video on the channel if you never had a chance to watch that. But either way, he's a local guy that I have to support. So he's normally my favorite player in the Blues, but after watching their playoff run going to the Cup last year, I really developed that much more of an appreciation for defenseman Colton Parayko. I mean, not only is he a beast on the ice, but to watch him what he did for Leila Anderson off the ice as well, and that connection. Watching all that just really earned a lot of respect for me and how hard he plays on the ice as well. He just became such a big component of that blue line that just really, I'll have a lot of respect for Colton Parayko and how he plays and what he brings to the Blues on and off the ice. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks, and my former captain in Ottawa, Erik Karlsson, is definitely by far my favorite player. Like I said, being a Senators fan, this team has been gutted the last couple of years, and we've had a lot of top players be spread around the NHL. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. Ottawa develops stars and trades them away because they don't want to pay them. So ultimately, Erik Karlsson's a Shark now, has been for a little over a year, and he's still a player that I have a lot of respect for and will continue to cheer for as long as he's playing hockey here. I mean, Erik Karlsson's one of the most dynamic defensemen in the NHL. One of the greatest player, if not the greatest player in Senators history. He's right up there with Daniel Alfredsson. So I will cheer for him no matter where he plays. And it looks as though he's likely going to finish his career out with the Sharks after inking a mega extension this past offseason. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and my favorite player on that team is the youngster who just signed himself a nice contract as Brayden Point. Brayden Point is a lot of fun to watch. I really have a lot of appreciation for the guys that are incredibly fast and can do things at really high speed. He's a speedster around the ice. He's developed into being a really solid two-way player. He can play in all situations. He's really the force that drives a lot of that offense. Even though Stamkos and Kucherov are the longer-time veterans who get a lot of the accolades, Brayden Point certainly working his way up there as well to being one of the most top players on that team. But in my opinion, he really drives a lot of the play and is a major reason why they've been so successful over the past couple of years. Getting him under contract is a huge for them for the coming year. Unfortunately, he will miss the first little while of the upcoming season here, but Brayden Point is a lot of fun to watch and by far my favorite player on the Lightning. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, and my favorite player is one of the longest serving current Leafs, and that's defenseman Morgan Rielly. Now, that may come as a surprise because obviously they have so many strong offensive forwards, but you know what? Morgan Rielly's a player I get a ton of respect for. He really broke out last year and really showed that he's an elite defenseman in the NHL and certainly capable of competing offensively with some of the top guys around the league. He's been there for a long time. He certainly developed to be a good leader within that team as well, and I just really appreciate what he brings brings on that blue line and to that overall roster. I mean, the Leafs are a team that's highly offensively gifted. They got a lot of dynamic young forwards. Watch the Leafs, the player that sticks out for me that I enjoy the most is Morgan Rielly. Next up, we have the Vancouver Canucks, and by far my favorite player on the Canucks is Elias Pettersson. Pettersson was a lot of fun to watch as a rookie last year. Really offensively gifted, dynamic forward. He's really going to accelerate that rebuild in Vancouver quite quickly. He's having a major impact already. I can't wait to see what he can do in year 2. But whenever I had a chance to watch the Canucks, he was by far the most dynamic player that I look forward to watching. I mean, they do have some other strong players as well, but I think by far he is the most gifted and the most fun to watch on that team. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, and my favorite player on that team should not be a huge shocker here. It's Mark Stone. Mark Stone, yes, he's a former Senator, so I got to watch him quite closely for a long time, but he's another player that kind of flies under the radar a little bit, underrated, underappreciated. He's a terrific two-way player. He leads the league in takeaways quite often as well. He's a solid offensive guy, can score you 30 goals, he can give you 70, 80 points. He makes everybody around him better. No matter who he had on his line in Ottawa, whenever they changed the lines up, whoever played with Stone became more productive because he's just that much impactful on the ice. He's a great guy off the ice. It does a lot for the community. And overall, Mark Stone is just by far the best player, in my opinion, on the Golden Knights. Next up, we have the Winnipeg Jets, and my favorite Jet right now is Mark Scheifele, one of the top centers around the NHL. He's slowly becoming one of the top goal scorers as well. Has terrific chemistry with Blake Wheeler. By far, in my opinion, though, their most complete player is Mark Scheifele on that team. Even though Wheeler wears the C, Scheifele is going to be longer term the face of that franchise. He's just a really solid two-way guy. Another guy I watched since his days in junior. Took a little bit longer to develop to the player he is today. I know there were some early days after the draft that Jets fans, I think, might have been a little nervous that he was going to be, either not necessarily be a bust, but not be the player he is today. But Mark Scheifele is an incredibly smart, hardworking two-way player, and I have a lot of respect for and really enjoy watching play. And last but not least, we've got the Washington Capitals, and my favorite player on that team is the Great 8, Alex Ovechkin. I mean, even though he's been around the league for a long time, he scores a ton of goals, he's still incredibly fun to watch, and at this point, I'm very interested to see if he can chase down the record of Wayne Gretzky. I mean, obviously, he's accomplished so much in his career, finally got himself a Stanley Cup, numerous Rocket Richard trophies, numerous other individual awards. He's still a lot of fun to watch, even at this stage of his career, and I can't wait to watch to see if he can turn out to be the greatest goal scorer of all time. So I know this has been a longer video, but those are my favorite players from all 31 NHL teams. Like I said in the beginning, I want to know who your favorite players are as well. So make sure you leave me some comments and let me know which players on these teams are your favorites as well. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.